All right, so let's wrap this whole thing up by looking at, again, the big picture of these trade routes. Yes, it's important that you guys have specific historical details, especially for your writing and for the content areas of the multiple choice questions. But as I said in the beginning of this class, we're trying to look at world history less from a detail standpoint, less from the what, the where, the when, the who, and instead we want to look more at the how and the why. So we're going to summarize all this together by looking at the spice impact of the development and the strengthening of these three specific trade routes. And when it comes to these trade routes, and especially going forward as we move into period three, the post classical era with the next unit, um, you need to be aware of how much trade along these three networks drove all of the intermingling, all of the diversification, the diffusion, the syncretism that we're going to be talking about going forward. Now, war is also something that drives cultural interaction. People are conquered, people are forced to live under other empires. People are dispersed because of war. When we talk about the Mongols, we're going to be talking about a lot of people being dispersed because of war. But the driving force in this next period, this next 300-year section of human history, is going to be trade. And it's going to be trade along these three main routes. Okay. So we're going to go kind of rapid fire here. Again, I'll splice in some specific historical detail and some examples, but you want to take away from this the themes of Silk Road, IO, and Sand Road trade. Okay. So the social themes of the interconnectedness of these big trade routes. Number one, it brings new social hierarchy to places where it didn't previously exist. Okay. The movement of Islam into West Africa, the movement of Buddhism into Southeast Asia, into China is going to restructure the thinking about social classes, about the relationships between men and women, the relationships between the upper class and the lower class. You're also going to see the mixing of races and ethnicities to create new social groups. The best example of this is going to be the development of Swahili in East Africa, where Arab traders from the Arabian Peninsula and from the Middle East interact with East African civilizations who are, for the most part, Bantu in ethnicity. And by intermingling, by intermarrying, what you get is the creation of a brand new ethnicity and a brand new language known as Swahili. Another big social change here is that the wealth between certain social classes intensifies. The expansion and the integration of these trade routes does wonders for the business or the merchant class, and provides new social mobility for people who really didn't have it under those classical empires. And this isn't limited just to the merchant class. Many peasants abandon, like we said, self-sustaining agriculture and move into the production of manufactured and trade goods in order to help integrate themselves into all of the wealth that's moving back and forth. Now, on the other hand, the abundance of trade and the amount of money that's being made also starts to create some unfavorable social distinctions and some ostracization, especially of the merchant class in certain societies, mainly in East Asia with China, especially in places like Japan and Vietnam. Um, and another major social impact is the abundance and the amount of wealth generated by this trade convinces many groups who had formerly been nomadic and pastoral to settle into a sedentary life to take advantage of the economic opportunities that are moving along these trade routes. Now, politically, these trade routes generate massive, massive wealth. We talked about in the last unit, the Romans alone were purchasing $2 billion of silk a year from China. And that's just the amount of silk going to Rome. So, I mean, you've got to, really kind of expand your economic outlook here and realize that even in 600 CE, 700, 800 CE, okay, well over 1500 years ago, you are looking at products and resources totaling in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year, changing hands all over Eurasia thanks to these trade routes, okay? That kind of money completely alters the political landscape. This generates massive tax wealth. The Han build incredible infrastructure all throughout China thanks to the wealth generated by this Silk Road trade. Okay. So, thanks to the Silk Road, you see the creation and the strengthening of many existing and new states. In a lot of societies, the wealth generated by these trade networks creates a new aristocracy, a new upper class, a business class, business owners, bankers, wealthy merchants. Okay. Now, trade can create booms, but it can also create busts and changes in the intensity or the direction of these trade routes can also bring about doom and destruction for political entities, for certain states. We talked about this with Meroe, Kush, and with Axum back 2 or 3 units ago, where as the Nile River trade and the Red Sea trade routes start to shift away from them and become more integrated with the Indian Ocean, both of those political units, both of those states see serious decline and eventually destruction because the trade that they had built their society around financially has now dried up for them. In terms of how these trade routes push our interaction with the environment, there is massive terraforming that goes into the new infrastructure for these trade routes, trading posts, wells. There's large scale, deforestation for land and timber, especially when it comes to producing new trade goods like silk and things like that. You also see the multiplication and the enlargement of many cities during this time period. Especially along the Silk Road, cities or towns that had started out as small villages along these footpaths and these camel paths now see a massive influx of wealth thanks to the movement of trade goods along them. And the size of these cities and the populations of these cities just explodes exponentially. There are certain cities especially in Central Asia, that essentially wouldn't even be on the map if it wasn't for this several thousand years of consistent trade back and forth along these routes. Places like Bukhara in Central Asia, places like Kilwa and Mogadishu in East Africa. These are places that start out as small agricultural societies and end up becoming massive trade ports where billions of dollars of goods change hands. Now, culturally, this is the one where you really got to look big picture because the amount of detail and the amount of ideas and technology and knowledge and religion and cultural practices that moves around and is diffused here is, I mean, that list could go on for days. So in terms of culture, you need to make sure that you know that along these trade routes, there is a massive diffusion of the big classical belief systems. Buddhism being the number one example along the Silk Road, Islam along the Indian Ocean, and sand roads. These trade routes bring religion to places outside of its home region. And that's going to be important because as we talk about the post classical era and period three, we're going to start to see some syncretism here where these religions move into areas where they previously had not been. And the people living in those areas begin to adapt the teachings and the ideas of the religion to fit their existing ways of life. And so you're going to see splits, divisions, new denominations, new sects, new branches of all of these major belief systems. Also, like we talked about, we gave some examples already. Technology diffuses on a large scale, maritime technology, gunpowder, the printing press, et cetera, et cetera. Architecture spreads wildly through these trade routes. When we get to the next unit on Islam, we're going to take a very specific look at Muslim architecture and how trade routes and conquests spread it all throughout Eurasia. Scientific knowledge moves along these trade routes. Again, when we talk about Islam in the next unit, we're going to talk about how Greek and Roman rationalism and the Greek and Roman advancements in science that move along these trade routes come to India, they come to the Middle East, and they help to kickstart a golden age in those societies. And then obviously, there is massive economic impact thanks to these trade routes. The biggest and the most important being the amount of wealth that is generated and accumulated along these trade routes. Again, there are entire cities that would not exist on the map without the amount of money changing hands along these trade networks. Another economic byproduct of this is a lot of social classes in these classical civilizations turn away from agriculture and into, like we said, the business world, cash crops, artisan work, mining, things that provide more trade goods to feed the insatiable appetite for luxuries along these trade networks. And then, and probably most importantly to modern times, is with the amount of money changing hands and the needs of merchants to track money, to manage their money, entire new economic systems and tools are created to serve these massive trade networks. The banking industry is developed in China, the Middle East, and Europe almost simultaneously to be able to handle the influx of wealth that's generated along these trade networks. The idea of credit is developed under the Islamic Caliphate. The idea of paper currency as opposed to gold and silver coin as currency is developed by the Chinese in order to serve people moving along the Silk Road, because obviously paper currency is going to be smaller, it's going to be lighter, it's going to be easier to carry than massive amounts of gold and silver coinage.